Everyone thought she was ordinary. A white t-shirt, old jeans, and a quiet demeanor. When she walked into the luxury car dealership, they only glanced at her, never truly listening. "These cars aren't for people like you," they said. But the next morning, a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of that dealership. When the door opened, everyone went silent. Because that woman wasn't just a customer. She was about to teach them all a lesson on true value. And this time, the loudest voice was the one that never shouted. Appearance doesn't say it all, but sometimes silence speaks volumes. When Elisa walked in wearing a simple white t-shirt and faded denim jeans, the atmosphere of the flashy gallery showroom changed instantly. The light filtering through the glass ceilings reflected off the shiny chrome finishes of the luxury cars. But her arrival seemed out of place in the midst of all this opulence. Her auburn brown hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, and there was no makeup on her face, nor any noticeable jewelry. It was as if she had stumbled in here by mistake, not as a customer. In the far corner of the showroom, a group of sales consultants glanced at her while chatting amongst themselves, one of them chuckling softly. "Can I help you?" came a voice with a fake smile. It was Patrick, the showroom's most experienced sales manager. His blue suit, shiny shoes, and almost theatrical movements reflected the elite lifestyle that these expensive cars represented. As he walked towards Elisa, his eyes scanned her from head to toe. Then, with the disdainful expertise he had gained over the years, he repeated his question. "I think you're in the wrong place. These cars start at several $100,000. Elisa didn't flinch. She turned her gaze to a dark blue coupe rising in the center of the showroom. "I'd like to take a closer look at that model," she said, tilting her head slightly. There was neither arrogance nor shyness in her voice, only certainty. But Patrick was used to such remarks. He would gently but firmly direct dreamers like her out the door. To him, she was no different. "Of course, but this model is shown by appointment only," he lied. "It's reserved for our serious clients." As soon as he noticed a stylish couple entering from the side, he shifted his attention entirely to them. "You can take a brochure," he said to Elisa, then turned his back. For a brief moment, a shadow appeared on Elisa's face. Even if it lasted only a few seconds, it was a moment where one might expect respect. But Elisa was used to this. Over the years, such looks had become familiar to her. A young sales representative named Lucas had been watching this scene from a few meters away. In his early 20s, his shirt was slightly too big, but there was honesty in his gaze. After Patrick moved away, he shyly approached. "If you'd like, I can give you some information about the car," he said. Elisa smiled faintly. "Please," she replied. As Lucas spoke about the car's technical features, Elisa's eyes were fixed on how Patrick opened the car door for the new woman in a stylish outfit. She was witnessing once again how worldly values were being distributed. "This car is special," Elisa said quietly. "Just for serious customers." Lucas looked embarrassed. "Are you really considering this car?" he asked sincerely. Elisa shook her head. "My sister just finished a tough treatment last year. This is a gift she's dreamed of since childhood. I want her to feel like she deserves it." At that moment, Patrick was introducing the car's interior to the newly arrived customers. Without disrupting the scene, Elisa quietly approached and spoke again. "I want to buy this car today." Patrick's smile froze. At first, he didn't understand. Then his voice rose slightly. "This isn't a dream, ma'am. It's an investment. You're talking about cash, right?" His voice echoed through the showroom, and a few customers turned their heads to look. Elisa remained silent. She didn't seem affected by the mocking laughter. "Cash," she simply said. Patrick stepped closer, his voice now lower but more threatening. "Look, this behavior isn't professional. If you're serious, you come dressed appropriately and by appointment. Otherwise, the door is right there." The showroom fell silent. Elisa scanned the crowd, seeing the deserved contempt on everyone's face. Yet, no one knew what she represented in that moment. At that moment, not only in the showroom but in the minds of everyone watching, a woman's place was quietly being defined. Elisa walked towards the door, gently heading toward it. But at that moment, she pulled out her phone from her pocket and dialed a number. In her eyes, there was no sadness, only calculated patience. And no one knew that with that phone call, everything in this showroom would change the next morning. Elisa took a deep breath as she stepped out of the gallery. The morning sun felt warmer and more genuine than the mocking glances she had received. but the fire inside her was deeper than it appeared on the surface. This wasn't the first time she had encountered such disdain, but maybe, for the first time, there was a spark inside her to change it. She quickened her pace as she brought her phone to her ear. On the other end, a familiar voice answered immediately. "Elisa? Is everything okay?" In their large, glass-walled office at home, Alexander had set aside his work the moment he heard his wife's tone. They had been married for 15 years, and a single pause in her voice was enough for him to know something was wrong. "It was just a little experience," Elisa said, a smile mixed with sarcasm. "A lesson." She then described everything that had happened, the attitude of Patrick, the obstacles she faced trying to reach the car in the showroom, the waves of subtle arrogance, and the eventual exclusion she had experienced in front of everyone. Alexander listened carefully. He didn't interrupt or comment. The hurt in her words couldn't be softened by words alone. When Elisa finished, there was silence. But in that silence, a decision was being made. "What do you want to do?" Alexander finally asked. Elisa thought for a moment. "I could have done nothing. But then I thought, there was that young guy, Lucas. He really tried to help me. And there are so many people like me, judged for their appearance." Her voice hardened with determination. "This isn't just my issue. It's time to show people something." A glint appeared in Alexander's eyes. The moments when he admired his wife the most were always like this. The determination of a woman who carried justice, not anger. "All right then," he said, a slight smile on his lips. "Let's make a plan, but we won't go overboard." Elisa smiled. "I don't want you to buy a gallery or anything like that." Alexander laughed. "I promise. We won't fall into the cliché." But in his mind, the script had already begun to be written. This wasn't just a show or a revenge plan. This was an opportunity to hold up a mirror to the faces of others. A mirror where everyone who looked at it would have no choice but to see themselves. That evening, in the silence of their spacious home, the plan took shape. Calls were made. A few lawyers were consulted. Logistics were discussed. Alexander wasn't just aiming to buy the car Elisa wanted, but to create an impact that would change the prejudices of the people in that showroom. But he wasn't going to do it with shouting. He would do it with class and grace. Elisa, however, needed nothing more than to witness this plan. "I don't need to be there," she said quietly. "I've already lived through what I needed to. Now it's their turn." The next morning, as usual, the front of Boston Luxury Motors was filled with shiny cars. Patrick, wiping the dust off his shiny shoes, was still telling his colleagues about the scene he had with Elisa the previous day. Can you imagine? A regular woman comes in asking about the Azure. She said it was cash, like she's buying lemons at the market. Laughter filled the air. One of the prospective customers who walked in was even affected by the vibe. The sales team, as usual, was eager to separate the serious customers from the dreamers. At exactly 10:17, a shadow fell in front of the gallery building. The sound of the engine was so familiar that even the most experienced salespeople turned their heads. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. The long-bodied, custom-made Rolls-Royce Phantom, with its navy blue finish that subtly changed color in the sunlight, silently stopped in front of the entrance. Even before the doors opened, everyone fell silent. The door was carefully opened by a chauffeur wearing white gloves. The man who stepped out wasn't just the representative of a brand. He was the embodiment of a philosophy of life. Alexander, in his gray pinstriped suit, with his simple but flawless posture, wasn't walking as a CEO, but as a message. Every step he took was silent but powerful. Patrick, instinctively, was the first to approach. "Welcome, sir. You honor Boston Luxury Motors with your presence. I'm Patrick, the sales manager. I'd like to show you a few of our vehicles today." Alexander stopped. His eyes locked on Patrick's face. "I'm here for a special car," he said. "The navy blue version of the Azure model you were trying to show yesterday." Patrick's excitement split in two in an instant. "Great choice, sir. I can show you right away. I'm sure we can offer a great solution for a distinguished customer like you." Alexander narrowed his eyes. "I believe my wife was here yesterday, and when she asked about that car, she was given another direction." Patrick's smile cracked. Ma'am, excuse me, but I don't recall." Alexander's voice never rose, but the air in the showroom turned icy. White t-shirt, denim jeans, simple shoes. She was the first person to greet you at the entrance. And you thought her place wasn't here. Patrick's eyes widened. In the background, Lucas held his breath. because he knew the best what had happened. At that moment, the owner of the gallery, Richard, entered. "Is everything all right?" he asked. But the answer didn't come from Alexander. It came from Lucas, who suddenly stepped forward. "No. Yesterday, there was a woman who was judged based on her appearance, and everyone ignored her. But that woman, she was much more than you thought." Everyone in the showroom went silent, because no sales pitch could cover up this truth anymore. The atmosphere in the showroom had shifted instantly. Even the shine of the luxury cars seemed dull in the shadow of the silent tension. Patrick's face looked as if it had drained of all color. The woman he had looked down on just the day before turned out to be the wife of such a man. But what was truly shocking was that this wasn't just a personal mistake, it was a reflection of a deeper misunderstanding. Alexander, without taking his eyes off Richard, spoke calmly. "Mr. Mason, I assume you're here because you've heard how my wife was treated when she visited this showroom yesterday?" Richard averted his gaze. "Yes, I witnessed part of the incident. But I didn't know all the details," he said defensively. But Alexander's voice, as calm as ever, had turned even more dangerous. "The details are as follows. Your sales manager, based on my wife's attire alone, blocked her from seeing the car. He suggested secondhand vehicles instead, and he told her those cars weren't for people like her. And he did this openly, in front of everyone." The silence in the showroom wasn't just from shame anymore. Everyone held their breath, unable to predict where this would lead. Alexander took another step and turned his gaze back to Patrick. "What surprised me the most was, you forgot that everyone who walks into this gallery is not just a potential customer, but a potential human being. What you sell matters less in moments like these than what you believe in." Patrick could no longer find the words. He swallowed, sweated, but couldn't gather the courage to form a sentence. At that moment, Lucas stepped in again. I'd like to add something," he said, his voice shy. All eyes turned to him. Ms. Elisa, your wife, was very clear. She had specified which car she wanted. She was very polite, but she was never taken seriously. His eyes turned to Patrick. "It was the most embarrassing moment I've experienced." Alexander nodded to Lucas. "Thank you for your courage." Then he turned to Richard. "Mr. Mason, do you know my wife wanted to gift that car to her sister? She went through a serious illness last year, and Elisa wanted to give her this gift. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a celebration of life. But you and your team didn't just shatter a dream, you belittled a value." Richard was now fully on the defensive. "Mr. Collins, rest assured that this does not reflect our company's values. We will take all necessary steps. I'd like to make up for this incident." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Make up for it," he said sarcastically. "Yes, some things can be made up for, but some things are meant to be remembered. I didn't come here just on behalf of my wife. I came to send a message about how people should be judged." Patrick's desperate gaze suggested he was about to hear an execution order. But Alexander smiled. "No, Patrick, I'm not interested in firing you. You won't get off that easily." He took a deep breath. "The foundation Elisa and I work with is organizing a special fundraising night next month. We're building a sports complex for children with physical disabilities. And you will be working that night. Not as a guest, as staff. You'll be serving children in wheelchairs, setting up tables, and cleaning the floors." Patrick's eyes widened. "What? Me?" Alexander shook his head. "Yes. See where people come from, what they're fighting. Before deciding who's superior enough to judge someone by their appearance, hear their story." Richard intervened. "This is an extraordinary offer, but it could be educational." Then, with a strained smile, he added, "If you're still interested in the cars." Alexander turned to Lucas. "I've made my decision on that." Lucas's eyes widened. "You want to work with me?" Alexander's response was clear. "You were the only one who spoke to my wife with respect and actually listened to her. We'll be purchasing the Azure for my sister with you. And perhaps we'll also buy from your company's fleet." Patrick's knees felt like they would give out. No sales left, no superiority. Only facts and a lesson were left on the table. And this lesson was read not from the signs, but from character. The charity night was the largest event ever organized by the foundation Elisa had established. The walls of the hall were adorned with colorful drawings by children. Some were walking with canes, some were in wheelchairs, and others could only communicate with their eyes. But what they all shared was the excitement of the evening. Because this night wasn't organized for them, it was organized thanks to them. Patrick, however, that night, was noticed not for his elegance, but for his silence. He wore an ordinary staff vest. He adjusted his glasses repeatedly, helped waiters set the tables, and assisted children in wheelchairs to get over the curbs. Everything was unfamiliar to him. This place was ruled by patience, silence, and unseen effort. No one asked who he was, and no one cared about his flashy past. Here, what mattered wasn't who you were, but what you did. At one point during the night, a 10-year-old boy named Thomas approached Patrick with a basketball in his hand. "Can you bounce the ball?" he asked, his eyes sparkling. Patrick smiled, but his gaze immediately shifted to the corner of the room. I think I used to be able to." Thomas giggled. "Come on, you can't learn the form without getting on the court." Patrick reluctantly took the ball and started bouncing it. On the first try, the ball slipped off his foot. The boy laughed out loud. "Not bad, but you need a bit of adaptive practice." This sentence struck Patrick deeply. That night, he was going through not only a physical, but also a mental adaptation process. The speeches on stage, the stories from the children's families, and the applause from every heart were shaking his value judgments one by one. These people weren't those who needed help. They were the ones who defined life. And he, until now, had only looked at storefronts and picked people based on appearances. Throughout the evening, Elisa's graceful yet simple manner won everyone's heart. When she entered the hall in her plain blue dress, Patrick had to look away. But when Elisa came up to him, there was neither bitterness nor arrogance in her. "How's it going?" she asked. Patrick swallowed. "Tough," he said honestly, "but necessary." There was a few seconds of silence. Elisa looked into his eyes and softly continued, "Thomas seems to like you. According to him, your basketball skills are limited, but you have potential." Patrick laughed, for the first time, genuinely. "I think I need an honest person." Elisa shook her head. "And you needed a place where they'd ask about your stance today, not your past." With that sentence, something shifted inside Patrick. No customer loss, sales target, or untimely campaign he had ever faced was as meaningful as the self-confidence this child gave him. By the end of the night, children were dancing in the hall, parents were shedding tears, and Alexander was silently watching them from the side. Patrick approached him and hesitated. "Mr. Collins, I think I've learned something." Alexander's response was clear. Learning is worth more than apologizing. But the most valuable thing is to continue living that lesson. Patrick lowered his head. "I'll keep going. With these kids, with this world. I want to stay." Alexander wasn't surprised. "Then welcome to real life." A month had passed since the charity night. Patrick was now volunteering 3 days a week at Elisa's foundation, playing basketball with the children, assisting in physical therapy sessions, and sometimes simply listening in silence. What had started as a forced step had now become his refuge. Because there, his CV, his suit, and his title didn't matter. There, only presence and sincerity had value. When he returned to the gallery, things had changed. The void created by Blake's absence had first led to a strange silence. Richard Mason had initially taken a few superficial steps to improve the image, but then approved a comprehensive respect for the invisible training program that Patrick had suggested. Patrick was no longer just the sales manager. He had become an ambassador for change. He was teaching young employees not just about cars, but about how to truly understand people. Then one morning, Alexander Collins walked through the heavy glass doors of the showroom. Elisa wasn't with him, but the files he carried and the certainty in his steps made it clear that he wasn't here for a visit, he was here with an offer. The entire sales team stood up. Patrick paused for a moment, but then walked toward Alexander. "Mr. Collins," he said respectfully, but without hesitation to meet his gaze. Alexander got straight to the point. "Do you remember that day when I was considering updating our fleet? But at that time, this gallery didn't deserve that investment." Patrick nodded. "You're right." Alexander opened the folder. "But I've heard that some changes have been made. A young employee of yours, Daniel, praised you. And so did the children from the foundation." He then looked him in the eyes. "I have an offer for you." A deep silence fell in the middle of the showroom. The look of surprise on Patrick's face was a genuine emotion. "Me? You want me to handle your transactions?" Alexander shook his head. "Yes, this isn't just a sale. It's a principal agreement. I don't want to remember you just for your cars, but for your people as well. There should be someone with a transformation story behind this sale." Patrick's throat tightened. "This really means a lot to me," he said in a low voice. It's not just about trusting again. It's like being forgiven. A faint smile appeared on Alexander's face. Not forgiven, Patrick. Recognized again. People make mistakes, but rarely do they rebuild themselves. Daniel approached from the side and handed over the documents. Patrick extended his trembling hand, took the pen, and signed. It was an ordinary signature, but for him, that ordinariness was a rebirth. That same evening, Elisa was sitting in the office of the foundation, reading a book by the window. When Alexander entered, he wore that familiar look of satisfaction on his face. "We had the meeting," he said. Elisa looked up. "With Patrick?" Alexander nodded. "Yes. And believe me, he's a different man now." Elisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "So, sometimes, people really can change." Alexander smiled. "Yes, apologizing is a beginning, but healing is a journey." A year later, the same charity night was held, but this time in a larger hall, with more volunteers and an even stronger echo. The tablecloths were simple once again, the lights soft as before, but the spark in the hearts was brighter. The hope in the children's eyes shone not just for the donations received, but for the adults who believed in them. Patrick was there again that night. But this time, the volunteer vest he wore wasn't a punishment, it was an honor. He was no longer just a staff member. He had become the foundation's constant supporter and mentor. In fact, he had initiated the Seeing the Invisible program for the gallery staff on his own initiative. One of the volunteers pointed to him and whispered, "He used to pick customers based on their clothes. Now he's teaching kids with autism." There was a stir in the room as Elisa entered, dressed in a simple blue dress. Alexander was by her side. As usual, they moved forward with understated but noticeable grace. When Patrick saw them, he stood up, but Alexander raised his hand. "Please sit down. Now we're your guests." A little while later, a young boy appeared on stage, Thomas. He had squeezed a basketball under his arm, his jacket collar slightly askew, but the expression on his face summed everything up. "This hall is huge, but I think the biggest change has happened inside the people," he said into the microphone. "Like Mr. Patrick. When he first came, he couldn't bounce the ball. Now he passes it to me under the basket. And he does it right." Amid the laughter, Patrick's eyes welled up. In that moment, he understood. True success wasn't in the spotlight. It resonated in a child's smile. When the night came to an end, everyone started to leave the hall. Patrick escorted little Mia in her wheelchair to the elevator. When he turned back, Elisa met him. "I watched the game you played with Thomas. You're passing the ball pretty well now," she said with a slight smile. Patrick shrugged. "I still can't dunk, but I'm trying." Then he stopped and looked into her eyes. "I need to tell you something. That day at the gallery, if someone else had been in your place, I might not have been so shameless. But you didn't react, you taught a lesson. And I've never forgotten that." Elisa lowered her head, her eyes glowing with a quiet silence. "We can be heard without raising our voices, Patrick. What matters isn't what you shout or what you stay silent about. What matters is what you stay silent with." At that moment, Alexander approached them, gently patting Patrick on the shoulder. "Daniel enjoys working with you. By the way, if you'd like to discuss the new showroom plans, I can drop by tomorrow." Patrick responded without looking away. "Now we're teaching more than just sales. We're teaching humanity there. We give a small card with each card delivery." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "What does it say?" Patrick smiled. "True value isn't in the outer shell. It's in the respect you carry inside." That night, Patrick watched from the back corner of the hall as Elisa and Alexander danced with a child. In their every movement, there was an unseen revolution. And Patrick was now a part of that revolution, silent, proud, and sincere. If this story has moved you, if you've ever remembered a moment where you were judged with a single glance, or if you've witnessed someone unknowingly judging others based on their appearance, don't forget to share this video and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes a story doesn't just change the characters, it changes the viewer too.